с опозданием на 2 минуты мы начинаем заседание. И первый доклад сегодня читает Мигель Villanueva Svensson, The Accentuation of the As Team, plural oblique cases in Old Lithuanian.
Спасибо. Ничего, я буду говорить по-английски.
Мы поймем, может быть.
Can you see that?
Yes.
It's clear, everything.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, perfect.
Everything is clear.
So I will just move on to the PDF and we'll speak about everything. Okay, so the topic today is the accentuation of the as temporal oblique cases in Old Lithuanian. More specifically, I will say something about the instrumental plural. About the other, we'll speak about all cases, but there is where there's something to say, I believe. Now, first, some introduction. When we speak about the Old Lithuanian accent, we actually have in mind one text, Dauxas Postile, from, there you have the date. We have something more, but very little. And what we have is, it's just a complement, really, to Dauxas Postile. There you have Dauxas Postile facts. The most important, of course, is that he wore the Postile. And from a linguistic point of view, the fact that he was the main representative of the central variant of Lithuanian in that age, which in our case, we are speaking about plural oblique cases, has a couple of implications. The first one is that the dative plural is consistently mus, pretty much very rarely with a copy of the vowel, and that the locative plural is se. That's, of course, potentially relevant, maybe, of course, but it's the fact. Now let's move to the sources, and that will be more important than it usually is. We have 3 editions of Dauxas Postile by Voltaire, the first edition, then by Biržiška in 1926, which is the one we normally use because it's excellent. Really, you can read it easily and so on. And there was an edition 20 years ago, which is barely readable, so practically useless. It's a pity, but that's the reality. And then I have quoted a couple of internet resources, which are reliable. One is a facsimile edition, and the other has the transcribed text. So if you don't have a very good library, still, you can do everything by yourself just using the internet. Yeah, speaking of Dauxas accent, the main source, of course, is Scargius' monograph on Dauxas accent, which is excellent by all possible standards, it's reliable. Then I will meet a couple of problems with Scargius' data, put it this way. But the book is excellent. So we have a good monograph on the most important accented text of all Lithuanian. Then you can complement it with Kudzinovsky's Index Słownik, which is a dictionary, pretty much. And now we also have a word concordance from these Sienierasti old writings, which is in the internet for free. Now let's move to we'll see that all these sources are more important than it may seem at first sight, because there are differences in the way they read the text, and that's the point. Now let's move to the main issues with Dauxas accent. The first one, if you just read a couple of pages, you will have the impression that everything goes. You got variants, you got unaccented words, you got words with 2, even 3 accents, words with the accent in a place where it's pretty much impossible, and so on. So, it's a mess. That said, when we have enough evidence, a clear picture emerges normally. But you have to have enough evidence in order to be certain that this or that case is accented in this or that position, as a matter of fact in Dauxas. It's very important to have this in mind. So you will always get nuance forms, variants. If you have enough evidence, you know what was the accentuation, but you have to have enough evidence. And there's no need to dramatize Dauxas accent. It's usually the one of modern Lithuanian, with some exceptions. And you can classify those exceptions in 2 groups. The first one is the ones we all agree how to explain. For instance, in Lithuanian, you have a tendency to spread mobility, which was not so advanced in Doxa's times. So there you got archaism that you will not get in the modern language. But then you also have more problematic exceptions. For instance, to give the second example, we have sunus as mobile in modern Lithuanian, which goes with Slavic sinus, APC. In Doxa, we have some variants with AP1, as if it were immobile. Actually, mobility is dominant already in Doxa. Are these variants real or not? Well, we don't have just 2 or 3 examples, then we would be certain probably they are mistakes. We have more than that. Enough to be certain that they were 2 accent paradigms in Doxa? Well, that's an open question, put it this way. And now let's move to the topic of this paper, which is stress position in the plural oblique cases. So some preliminaries. Obviously, we are only concerned with mobile paradigms. Immobile paradigms, yes, are not important for us. Second, what we will be concerned with is where is the stress. If you have monosyllabic endings where the stem vowel and the ending are together, like in the instrumental plural dictates or something like that, obviously there is no problem because there is only one possible place where you can put the stress. If you have disyllabic endings, like sunumis, for instance, theoretically, the stress could be either on the ending or on the stem vowel. Most Balto-Slavic accentologists, including myself, go for all ending accentuation as the oldest as the rule, because we know that mobile paradigms in Balto-Slavic were a combination of enkinomina, unaccented word forms, and word forms with lexical stress in the last syllable. So that's what we expect. However, as a matter of fact, we have instances of stem accentuation, stem stress, both in Baltic and Slavic, as a matter of fact. And of course, then the question is, how do we explain them? I have also included the disyllabic cases. This is what I mean with disyllabic cases or disyllabic endings from the singular, not to get the whole picture. And then I have to mention 2 very, very important practical problems. The first one is that Doxas doesn't put an accent on the wo, which is written like in Czech, u with an o. Obviously, because there was already a diacritic, so you could not put a stress. That's irrelevant for most endings, but it's very important for the all stem locative plural. Sorry, there are some mistakes. Dectuose, where if there was a variant dectuose, we will not see that from the text because they just don't write an accent there. The second is more important. The accent on the E is there, but it's really hard to see. It's just a bigger dot. It's a dot, but a bit bigger one than the normal dot. It's hard to decide sometimes whether that dot that you see on the I is an accent or not. And that's a serious problem because we are concerned precisely with many endings that have an I in either on the stem vowel or on the ending. And I insist it's very hard to decide. And Skargius and Kudzinovsky normally didn't read an accent where the authors of the word concordance of Senior Rastei actually read an accent on the I. And I have given both figures. I think normally the authors of the concordance should be right against Skargius and Kudzinovsky. But I cannot guarantee that. And I haven't done the job by myself because for the most part, I just began to doubt whether I'm really seeing an accent or not. I mean, it's really hard to see. Okay, so, and now let's move to not to the data, but to the expectations for Doxa. And I think we are allowed, theoretically, only theoretically, to expect to have 2 models. The first one is what I have called the Slavic one, which means final accent except when retracted by Hirschlow. This is what we reconstruct for Slavic before the Bohr's law, and what most people, including myself, project into Baltic Slavic. The second model is modern Lithuanian, which is very simple. Final accent, except in the dative plural, which has the stress on the stem vowel, as a matter of fact. We have some variants, but they are probably not important for us. Now, as I told you, most authors believe that Slavic is more conservative than Baltic in this respect. If this is true, or rather than Lithuanian, because we have very little data from the other Baltic languages. We will go to that in a couple of minutes. So, if Lithuanian is viewed from a Slavic perspective, either we have complex analogy. So, in the dative plural, we go for the A stem accentuation. In the instrumental plural, for the accentuation of the I and U stems. So, analogy in different directions. Or another possible scenario is that they first generalized the final accent and then retracted the accent in the case of the dative plural. And theoretically, you could go for other potential combinations. So theoretically, of course, we will then see. And just an observation, we of course expect Old Lithuanian to go with modern Lithuanian, but this cannot be taken as a matter of fact. It could be that Old Lithuanian preserves an error for Baltic Slavic data. The other languages, the other Baltic languages, help us very little. Latvian seems to confirm the accentuation of Old Lithuanian for the dative plural and the locative plural, stem vowel versus ending accent. But we have lots of variations in the Latvian dialects. Generally speaking, the tones in non-initial syllables in Latvian is an under-researched topic. So we cannot be totally certain about that. But maybe that's correct. I'm not saying no. And Old Prussian, unfortunately, doesn't tell us much in the case of the genitive plural. In the case of the dative plural, it certainly confirms that the stem vowel accent of the dative plural is old, is proto-Baltic in date. It probably confirms that for the O stems as well, but here we cannot be 100% certain. And now I will go to the data, and I will go very quickly because we can then run through the examples, but I will go quickly in order to have more time for the discussion. Genitive plural is a monosyllabic ending, and thus it represents no problems. The accent is where we should have it. I have modernized the spelling where there is no problem to discuss. In the dative plural, also, we don't have any problem. The accent in Dausha is consistently on the stem vowel. As a matter of fact, we have very few counterexamples that look like just mistakes. Then the question becomes, why do we have the accent consistently in the stem vowel? In a forthcoming article, I have, following an earlier suggestion by Carrasquer-Vidal, I have proposed that it was due to Niemenen's law. The accent was originally on the ending and was retracted according to Niemenen's law, just like in the nominative singular of the A stems. And the article is forthcoming. It should be out hopefully in half a year or 1 year, something like that. If this is true, as I believe it is, it has several implications. The first one is trivial. Slavic is conservative. The second one is more interesting. The A stem dative plural is undeterminate. We just don't know where was the accent where Niemenen's law applied. It could be either in the stem vowel or on the ending. We just don't know. Now let's move to the instrumental singular, of course, only from the U, I, and consonant stems, where everything is very simple. The accent in Dausha was in the same place where it is in modern standard Lithuanian, on the ending. We have very few examples where it could be, where it is in descriptively on the stem vowel, and they look like obvious mistakes. The data are clear in the case of the instrumental singular. It's like in modern Lithuania. It's not the stem vowel, it's the ending that carries the stress. Now let's move to the locative singular. Here it becomes into more interesting territory if you look at Kudzinovsky's data, we have probably more instances of stem accentuation than expected. In the case of the IU stems, not a lot, but in the case of the A stems and the S stems, really more than we expected. It looks like here we have real variation going on in Daoxia, and in the case of the I and U stems, we cannot be certain. For the U stems, you would say probably not, but we have to remember that the numbers are more impressive, look more impressive than they actually are, because normally we have like 1, 2, 3 words that are that have a lot of examples. So I mean, it could be that yes, these words determine the picture that we get. Okay, but let's concentrate on that. It looks like we have real variation in the A stems. And this is plainly confirmed by the adjectives and pronouns. Here the facts are from the State Concordance, where we can compare A stems with O stems. And O stems are really very clear. We have so few cases of stem accentuation, which we could have, there is no problem, there was no problem for that, that there must be mistakes. The accentuation of the adjective and pronominal locative singular was on the ending, not on the stem. Whereas it looks like in the case of the I stems, and this confirms what we have seen for the nouns, it could be either on the stem vowel or on the ending. As a matter of fact, this is confirmed by apocopy. We don't have apocophated for the locative. Yes, have ame. Well, maybe there are a couple of examples, but they must be really rare. Whereas apocophated oi is frequent in the A stems. So it looks like we can fix the situation, at least for the pronouns and the adjectives. Probably not for the nouns, because we just we don't have enough data from the I stems and the U stems. It was ame versus oye, oye, oi. Everything was there in Daoxia. Now let's move to the locative plural, where we have a similar situation. It looks like the A and E stems had stem accentuation, as a matter of fact, and as a reality, but we don't have lots of data, and that's a pity. And in the case of the O stems, we just don't know, because wo is never carries the stress, the graphic stress. So maybe the locative plural goes with the locative singular in having more than random stem accentuation variants in the A stems, but we cannot be certain. And now let's move finally to the instrumental plural. And disregarding for the moment Scafius and Kudzinovsky, let's see what we have. We really have a serious concentration of variation in the A stems, which is not matched by the I stems and the U stems, and more than random. So it looks like A stems really had, by the way, the E stems are not that, I mean, it's not really 8 against 30. I have counted shmonemis here. And if we dismiss shmones, we dismiss like 19 examples. We don't even have 20 examples. So really, we don't have enough evidence to decide on the A stems. What we have for the A stems, stem accentuation is a reality. There was real variation and strong variation in Daoxia, because, I mean, look at the numbers. They are very clear. Okay, and now let's move to the discussion of these facts that we have seen. And first, I mean, we have real variation. This, of course, has been recognized before. That's a fact. Now, the communist opinion, at least among Lithuanian scholars, is that we have a shortening of dissyllabic endings for structural reasons, and that it took place first in the dative, then in instrumental. First stress reduction, then vowel loss. Well, if what we saw before is correct, the dative plural certainly does not belong here, and actually it's not even, I mean, it's enough to look at Prussian. Prussian does not confirm that. Prussian has stem accentuation, at least for the A stems. And then their structural reasons were always there. Why did they apply almost only within recorded Lithuanian? That's an obviously important question. And as far as Dausha is concerned, this tendency does not actually explain the facts. It does not explain why this tendency to shorten applied in the I stems, but not, for instance, in the U and I and E stems instrumental singular. For instance, it doesn't explain the distribution that we have. A possible clue may be if we look at the variation that we have in present-day Lithuanian, where all the endings that have been quoted in this paper have variation in the language, all of them, without a single exception. And what we have is things like shirdimi, shirdim, gerame, geram, geroye, geroi, shirdimis, shirdim. By the way, shirdim, galvom is from the instrumental dual originally. Languose, languose. Languose is very rare. I mean, as you see, it goes in parallel. We have one long form, which is the standard one, and a shorter form. The exception is precisely galvomis. We have both galvomis and galvomis as variants in the modern language, and these are recorded at least from the beginning of the 20th century. Okay, so I think this really confirms that we have an issue precisely with the A-stem instrumental plural. It had real variation, both in Dausha, and it has been preserved in modern Lithuanian. Now the question, why? Why do we have this? Now we look at what the modern authors, modern Balto-Slavic accentology, historical accentology, tells about that. Well, actually, pretty much everybody behaves as if modern Lithuanian, galvomis, is all what we have. As I have tried to show, that's not true. We also have galvomis to account for. Now, historically, it has been explained as analogical to the final accent of the other stems. I think that's an excellent explanation. It's the traditional one. It looks like that's correct, but it leaves matters like chronology and the facts that I have presented and accounted for. Now, as for the locative, I will just keep it. Basically, in the locative, we cannot be so certain about the variance in Dausha. We don't have enough data apart from the locative singular of the pronouns and adjectives. And from a historical point of view, the locative is a very complicated ending, basically because it has been renewed formally several times. It has acquired a postposition at some point, and so on. So I will leave it at that, and I will concentrate on the instrumental plural, where I think the variation that we have is real, and that's an important fact, and we have to account for it. The explanation according as secondary shortened by structural reasons, I believe, is not good. It's a bad explanation. It doesn't explain the facts that we have, the distribution that you can see in Dausha, the fact that galvomis is substandard but attested in modern Lithuanian, whereas sunumis is not there, basically. So we have to account for it. And if you look at this from a Balto-Slavic perspective, of course, the question is, can it be the case that galvomis is actually goes with Slavic golvami, that it's a Balto-Slavic archaism? Well, it looks attractive, but at the same time, it looks suspicious, at least to me. Because, I mean, do we really expect such an isolated form in the program to be preserved for so long, from Balto-Slavic to just modern Lithuanian, a couple of centuries before our first text, to then begin moving the analogy? I mean, why should they expect so long, put it this way? So I believe the final explanation should include elements that are not so old, that are just pre-Lithuanian. And here I present my scenario, which goes in 4 steps. The first one is just a projection of Balto-Slavic as reconstructed from Baltic. You got accent always on the ending, except in the A stems where it had been retracted by Hirschlaw. Go to Baltic 2. Niemanen's law applies, and with that, stem vowel accentuation, not only in the A stems, but in the whole dative plural. Then analogy takes place. And my proposal is that they generalized ending accentuation in the locative plural, but not in the instrumental plural. Here, a new principle arose. Plural M cases accent the stem vowel, and that would be the Baltic, my proposal for Baltic. Then we go into pre-Lithuanian, where Saussure's law applies. And Saussure's law restores, put it this way, the original Baltic paradigm. The accent from Švegimis, which it's where it was secondary, goes to Švegimis, because the ending is acute, long acute in this case. And here you have the grounds to have what we have. Analogy applies, but it's a very late stage. So in the report, we have variation between Galvomis and Galvomis. And in this way, I mean, which is complicated, I admit it, but it explains the fact that we have why it was preserved for so long, and why it became inconvenient to have this Galvomis, I mean, at this precise stage. And just for the record, the last part of the scenario was already proposed by Anselins, but only the last part. Well, thank you for your attention.
Micro, please. Micro, please.
When is Lucian? Now.
Oh, yes, excuse me. We have about 3 minutes for discussion. Have you any questions?
I see.
Yes. So, Mate?
I have a question. When you say that there are the variant Galvomis besides Galvomis, what does that actually mean? What kind of variant is it? Just a colloquial?
Yes,
like
substandard.
In Vilnius or in
all around,
all
around, and has been all around at least since the beginning of the 20th century, which was recorded.
But so it was first recorded in 20th century. So there are no earlier records.
In Daukša.
I know, yeah, of course.
It's filled. That's the point. It's full of it. Not 50-50, but approaching, and it's substandard, and it's only the stems. No Shirdimis. That's interesting.
Yeah, that could be that could be an archaism as well. And I would just like to point to you that perhaps there's maybe just the typological comparison, but in Slavic you also have in locative plural. In Slavic you also have the end stress variant. So you have ach, which is the normal one, which is always reconstructed, and in Dybо you only have this, but you also have traces of ach with the like Lithuanian ose. So you may also want to take that into account, at least typologically, and maybe it can have some sort of a also Balto-Slavic origin, perhaps, but you can take that also into account.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, it's expected, because I mean, you got ending accentuation in the other stems, of course. I mean, the analogy is trivial.
It can be analogical, it can be independent of Lithuanian, but perhaps it's also related to its psychology.
Theoretically, of course. I mean, theoretically. Of course.
Yeah. Okay, it was a good lecture. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you. Other questions?
Eugen Hill has a question.
May I? Yeah. Okay, Miguel, thank you very much for a very interesting presentation and a lovely hypothesis. I just have a very minor question about Galvomis. You talked about the situation in Daukša, and you talked about the situation in the modern spoken Lithuanian. What is the situation in such potentially archaic dialect islands, such as Lazunai or Zietala? Did you take a look into them?
No, thanks. I mean, thanks. I didn't. Actually, I didn't thought about it. I don't know why, but obviously you are right. I mean, that's a place to look for that. Thank you.
So? Seroj.
No. Here is very important. The length of ami in some West Slavic languages that are not reflex of the old acute.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I have to look into that. Yeah. Thank you.
So, more questions. Ну, тогда...
Еще поднятая рука у Маты Капович.
О, Мата, да.
Yeah, I just wanted to add what Sergei said. It's the length in Czech and Slovak, this and you also have it in Czechoslovakian, you have the near acute in some dialects so in Nogach, so that was what I was talking about, so that's what,
No, I see the point, and of course it's important, I mean, I have to...